It is my great privilege to introduce our speaker tonight. Dr. Catherine Meeks is the Executive Director of the Absalom Jones Center for Racial Healing. Prior to the opening of this center, she chaired its precursor, the beloved Community Commission for Dismantling Racism for the Episcopal Diocese of Atlanta. And many of us know, most of us perhaps, that the Absalom Jones Center for Racial Healing in Atlanta is a resource nationally, across the national church, for the work of racial reconciliation. Dr. Meeks is a highly sought-after teacher and workshop leader, and she has been doing this work for over 4 decades, 40 years in the work of racial reconciliation, working to transform the structures of racism in and around Atlanta. The core of her work has been with people who have been marginalized because of economic status, race, gender, or physical ability as they pursue liberation, justice, and access to resources that can help lead them to health, wellness, and a more abundant life. This work grows out of her profound understanding of her call to the vocation of teacher, as well as her realization that all of humanity is one family which God desires to unite. That's exciting. Dr. Meeks is a retired Clara Carter Acri Distinguished Professor of Sociocultural Studies from Wesleyan College and founding Executive Director of the Lane Center for Community Engagement and Service. She characterizes herself as a midwife to the soul of her students and workshop participants. Midwife to the soul. We are honored and pleased and blessed that you might share some of your midwifery tonight with us.
Thank you.
If you've had the pleasure of reading her book, The Night is Long, but Light Comes in the Morning, Meditations for Racial Healing, if you've not had a chance to read it, I strongly encourage you do. It's just a fascinating collection of meditation, short meditations that help us introduce and deal with some of the most difficult, thorniest topics around racial reconciliation. I'm particularly moved by the chapter where you talk about perseverance, where you learned perseverance and speak to the importance of this long-term work. Delaware, will you join me in giving a warm, warm welcome to Dr. Catherine Meeks?
Bishop Brown, can you pull the podium back a little so I can see these people? Thank you. That's probably good. I don't want to mess up the wires.
Okay.
Thank you, Bishop Brown. And can everybody hear me everywhere? The microphone gentleman promised that I didn't have to think about this, but I do have to ask if you can hear, because I don't want to be talking and you don't know what I'm saying, though you might be just as well off. So thank you. It's good to be here. When I'm looking at myself on this monitor, I'm way darker than I am. So when people are looking at me out there, do they have any clue what I really look like? Who can answer that question? The technical person back there. When you see me on the monitor, how do I look? Because this light is, I'm being really petty here, but you know, do I look okay? There is something about that, you know. I've got on a bunch of red, and my mother told me that I should never wear red. And so I'm thinking it's the camera is paying me back for disobedience. Good. That's fine. Just don't want to embarrass my children. You know, I'm saying, Mama, what was the matter with you when you were in Delaware? It's good to be here. I have been so taken by the marvelous, careful way that Tony Snow and her whole posse have worked out for me to take care of me. Actually, had to tell people today, don't hover. Because I like caretaking, but I don't do well with hovering. And I live with my 37-year-old youngest son who he has worked it out pretty well. So he mostly just takes care of me. But I'm recovering from an upper respiratory infection, and he's come close to hovering. You know, I look up and he's standing in the door because he heard a pin drop in the room and he thinks I have fallen. It is lovely to be a 77-year-old taken care of by your 37-year-old and with such love and care. And when I said to him, you know, I don't want you to stay with me. I don't want us to stay in the same house because you think you have to. And what do your friends say? Anyway, you're 37 and you live with your mama. And he said, well, you know, my friends don't have anything to say, and other people just don't matter to me. And I thought, I don't know where you came from, but I'm keeping you. You know, it's really lovely to have, and I have an older son who will give me the shirt off of his back, but I'd have to tell him that I needed it. It wouldn't occur to him. As soon as I told him, he would say yes, but my youngest son would anticipate, and my oldest son will act. So, and it's really good because you learn to appreciate your children and let them be individuals instead of having to be copies of each other. And it's a major lesson for all of our interactions with each other, I think, to learn to take the gift that people have to give instead of insisting that they be somebody else. Because a part of our problem is that we want people to be who we want them to be instead of working on accepting who they actually happen to be. And if we would get past that and say, I need these other 5 things over here, but that's not what you got. And then we can appreciate this one gift and look for the other 4 people or 5 people to bring us the other. And I've really had some powerful lessons about that of late, wanting friends to be things that they couldn't be and having to think about how does it feel to be with somebody who's always wanting you to be something you can't be. And that's an important thing to pay attention to. We're really good in the church with that, particularly with the leadership. We always, particularly with the priest, we always want them to be who we made them up to be. And letting them just be who they are is something we need to pay attention to. But I'm delighted to be with Tony and Pam and 2 or 3 other folks that Tony said she had designated Pam to look after me. But then Pam is a magnet, so she brought a little crew with her. And so I finally drug a chair in here and hid for a few minutes before, in between events, just to make a couple phone calls. Thank you all for your loving care. And I feel so much better than I did yesterday morning when I got up to get on a plane to come here to make it possible to rest some. So thank you. I've never been to Delaware before, but I think somehow that I might be back. So it's been good to be here. So enough about that. So I want to read something to you. Tony told me that you were using Ephesians 2:10 as a kind of jumping off place for your thematic work around your convention. And I went and read that again last night, or a couple of days ago, actually. And the whole business about good works I want to talk about. I want to talk about that in your imagination about what that work is and then what's your journey with it. But I want to preface some, some of those things with reading a little piece here about my mama. So you can, because it's important for me to contextualize this a little bit so you understand how I've come to this space with these thoughts. And this is from actually a journal, a blog piece I wrote that was called Yes, Mama. I watched her week after week, sitting at the kitchen table, meticulously doing schoolwork that was to be sent to Philander Smith College in Little Rock, Arkansas, where she was a student working on her degree in education. This was before computers and distance learning. She was doing college-level work through what was called a correspondence program. Later, the college offered classes in a nearby town, which was about 25 miles from our home. Mama went to those classes as well. She would work in my father's sharecropping field for a part of the day before getting herself, my siblings, and me ready and in the car to attend her evening class. As the eldest as the eldest child, it was my lot to be the responsible one to attend to my brother and sister while she was in class. We behaved ourselves because Mama was doing something very important. She was getting an education. We weren't exactly sure what that meant, but we knew that we were an important part of it. Mama was already teaching school without her degree because one was allowed to do that in that era, the early 1950s. Of course, not having the degree meant that she did not get a very good salary. All of the teachers received small salaries, but those without degrees, got less. But teaching was better than being a maid or having no job at all. Thus, for the next handful of years, I watched my mother continue the pattern that is described above. She did not talk much about the value of education, but she did not need to do so. I paid attention. I knew that getting through school had something to do with being a freer person, and I knew that I wanted to be free, just like Mama wanted to be. In May 1964, I graduated from high school, and in August 1964, my mama graduated from college. She had gone to college through correspondence courses, extension programs, an occasional summer session for the major portion of my life. She went to the campus of Philander Smith College in the summer of 1964 to fulfill some type of residency requirement and take her final course. She was finally going to be a college graduate. Our aunt and uncle took us to the campus for her graduation, which was an amazing event for us. We were so proud of her that day with her black robe and cap. We knew that all of us had won something, though we weren't not quite sure what it was. I continued to be convinced that it had to do with my freedom. Mama seemed freer on the way back home from Little Rock. So a few months ago, and Stacy is here from the Seminary of the Southwest, the Seminary of the Southwest gave me an honorary doctorate, and so did Virginia Theological Seminary, and so is the Berkeley Seminary this next year, conferring a degree, an honorary doctorate for me, and I wrote this piece as I was thinking about all of that. A few months ago, I was reflecting on the lessons that I learned from my mother in her quest for education's freedom and as I was preparing to leave to go collect these degrees. And it was an amazing confluence of things for me because as I thought about it, I realized that my mother had taken 18 years to get one degree, and that I had, in my short life, gotten 3 degrees and now was getting 3 honorary degrees. And so I really had to reflect upon the bridge that my mother was for me getting from point A to point B. And my PhD is sitting on the floor in my office because I just didn't hang it up. But I've got to hang up those honorary degrees in honor of my mother and all the women like my mother who should have gotten honorary degrees but did not because of circumstances. I had many tears of gratitude that day for the courage of my mother and the lessons that she taught me about education, vigilance, freedom, and gratitude for being given the grace-filled honor to do the work that has led to these degrees that were being conferred upon me, because my mother had given me a gift that made it possible for me, as Bishop Brown mentioned me talking about perseverance. I want to talk to you some about that tonight, even though it won't be the same talk. I think it's hard to remember all the time what I've written in my books, but it's a bit different from the meditation on perseverance. But I think we live in a cultural space where giving up is too easy to do. If things take too long, if it's too hard, and particularly when it comes to racial healing, we're ready to give up as soon as we get done with the last book study. Aren't we done now? You know, little kids always ask their parents 10,000 times when you're traveling, when are we going to get there? Are we there yet? Are we there yet? And there is this constant litany across this country where I have been in the last 15 years doing this work. Why are we still talking about this? Why are we still doing this work? And we are still talking about it and still doing it because we hadn't done it yet. Just a very good reason to keep on doing something. So when you go back to Ephesians 2:10, and it talks about good works, because of the cultural spaces that we have come out of, we always go to the capitalist notion of investing time in projects and reaping a harvest. So we got to do something. We got to put something out there that allows us a chance to calculate it's going to take this much work and we ought to get this return. We're caught, all of us, everybody in this room is caught in that cultural construct. And so this is not a criticism, it's just a statement of fact. Now, what do we do with that becomes a different issue. Do we allow our lives to just be controlled by that way of thinking and being, or do we step back from it and interrogate it and see if there maybe is another way to behave? One of my favorite poets is David White. Some of you may know him and have read him. And he has a little poem called Start Close In. And if you've never read that poem, I want to encourage you to go look up the whole thing. I just want to tell you the first stanza. Start close in. Start close in, not with the second thing. Start with the first thing, not the second thing, not the third thing. Start with the first thing, the thing you don't want to start with. Start there, close in. When we think about Ephesians 2, outer work out there is critical and important. It has to be done. But if we don't start close in with ourselves, with our hearts, with our unconscious parts, what we do out there will not bear the kind of fruit we've been hoping for. It may actually bear fruit that would have been better to not grow in some instances. Sometimes we get all caught up in what we want to go out and do for a whole bunch of reasons that only keep us from doing the real work that we should have been doing, we could have been doing, that would have made us a happier person, a more content person. I don't know about happy. I want to erase that word and say a content person, because I think looking for contentment is a better journey than looking for happiness, because you learn to be satisfied with what's your lot. You learn to be okay with yourself. You know, I was speaking at Georgia Tech last week, and somebody asked me, what do you wish your mother had lived to see you do? And for a few minutes I was thinking, you know, finish school, have my kids, retire, blah, blah, blah. Went down the list real fast, and I thought, nah, that's not it. What I wish my mother had lived to see me do is to come to the place of accepting the person that I have become. That would have been a great gift to give to my mother, because I would have been a better daughter. Because up to then, I wanted her to fill in the gaps that she couldn't fill in because she was not me. And I have come to make my peace with, that was my mother's life. This is my life, and I like it just fine. And I would be a lot more pleasant to be around now than I was some of those times then. And I didn't know that I knew that. And the woman who asked me the question had tears streaming down her face. So I think there was something very inspired by her question and my response, because it was a wonderful question for me to make me look a little bit closer at where I happen to be. And I love that when I'm out talking and I learn something, because we should always be open to that. So what does start close in mean if you stop and take stock of what you're doing and what you're committed to? And we all are responsible for doing the best we can to make the planet better. We're responsible to take out the message of light, to be open to healing. But we don't take that light out unless we have allowed it to shine on us at the deepest places and the hidden places and the unconsciousness that makes the light hard to find in the first place. So, do you think about a lot, you read stuff like the peace that passes understanding, and we stand up and we say that stuff, and then you say, like, what does that even mean? And if you ever figure out what it means, how do you get there? I'm the person whose first diagnosis when I started into therapy was I had anxiety neurosis. And Lord knows I did have anxiety neurosis, worrying about everything, and worrying if I was worrying, and then worrying if I wasn't worrying. Just any excuse to worry is so there. And you listen to the news and you listen to everything, and folks, there's so much commitment to making sure we worry. And we stay connected to fear so we can worry. And if you're not worrying, and I'm going to teach you that worrying is what you need to be doing. So how do you find a peace that passes understanding in a culture that is committed to worrying and fear? How do you find that? And so when I ask those kinds of questions, I have to come back to, it must be something that is between me, in this case, and myself. That old thing, me, myself, and I. It's a kind of funny, silly thing, but it really is important. And there are that many parts of ourselves, and even more, that we need to get to know. So I like to think of having an inner community. You have a little inner community. Think about that. Think about community with all its, compartments that you can go open doors and look in. So there are all these little compartments inside yourself, and there are a bunch of little systems running around doing all kinds of stuff all the time. Some of you are old enough to know who Flip Wilson is in this room. Flip Wilson used to say, whatever he did, something that you needed to take responsibility for, rather than taking responsibility, he'd say the devil made him do it. And St. Paul says, what I want to do, I don't do, and what I don't want to do, I do. So the Flip Wilson's problem didn't start with Flip Wilson. It started a long time before, because St. Paul was around pretty much a long time before. And then I hear people blame God for stuff, and many times I hear myself say to people, could you leave God out of this and take responsibility yourself for what you need to take responsibility for? Don't tell me God didn't have anything to do with this. You made a decision you don't understand, and you're going to blame God for it. And that's just not good, because it leaves you not ever being able to see the truth that needs to be seen, because you have assigned this thing to God. So, and all I'm going to say is, well, you're just responsible, and you're just a bunch of people that need to go sit in a corner and suck your thumb and wait for the light. No, we as a culture are so scared to death to take a good look at ourselves until we have a whole bunch of negative ways to talk about people who do start close in. We call them navel gazers, and we think you wasted time going to therapy. I remember somebody really maligning me because I was happy about going to therapy, and they needed to be in therapy really badly, actually, and didn't seem to know it. Start close in. What is the good work that needs to be done inside of ourselves? And how then is that work reflected in the good work that's done outside? When we have stepped up to the plate to too many other people's narratives and expectations and a whole bunch of things because we didn't start close in. We didn't get the message from our own heart about what do we want to do. I do think that in the church, we people of faith can take the time to get the story straight. I do believe that. I don't think God's going to beat anybody up for trying to get the story straight for your own life, for our own selves. Someone said once, the way ahead is not always forward. The way ahead is not always forward. Sometimes the way ahead is to stop. When George Floyd was killed, I can't tell you how many emails and inquiries I got from people wanting to know, what can we do? What can we do? We didn't know it was so bad. I don't know where they've been living that they didn't know it was so bad, but the question was being asked. And I said what the native peoples in the Northwest say to their children who are lost in the wilderness: stand still. Stand still. Because the trees are not lost in the forest. They know where they are. And if you'll stand still and pay attention, the old wise people say to their children, the trees will help you find your way out of the forest. If we can stand still and listen to what we really want and discern the voices that keep spinning in our heads and pay attention to those little energetic systems running around inside, messing us up. You think you escaped, let me tell you, you didn't. They're in everybody. Everybody's got an inner community. You don't have to believe me, but just pay attention. Pay attention to the people that are bringing you messages about yourself that you don't want to hear. Pay attention to the people that are making you crazy. Pay attention to the people that get on your last nerve and how many of them you run into. And instead of blaming the world for sending you all of the nuisances in the world, ask yourself, what do I need to learn? Because if it's happening over and over and over, there is a message. There is a message to pay attention. I sometimes wish I didn't know this, because I just want to blame somebody and then put them on a rocket ship and say, go, and then I'll be done with you, rather than say, what is the lesson? What is the lesson? So something is happening right in my life at the moment that's taught me a ton of, oh, that's what that's about. I need to pay attention to that. So pay attention to the irritations. Pay attention also to the jealousy, because I find that in the communities of faith that I have any connection to, we have got a lot of things that need to be put away so we can get to the work. We can't get to the inner work or the outer work because there's so many blockages inside of ourselves. And fear, sometimes fear of people finding out who you really are, can be one of those things. But just fear in general, and just brokenness that's looking for healing, and many little aliens inside of ourselves that are looking for a home. What have we alienated inside of ourselves? What have we put out into the corner over here and said, I'll be back for you later, but we have no intentions of going back? And it's left then to become a renegade. So I've got this little girl. She's 5 years old. When my mother was 5 years old, we went from one part of Arkansas up to the Northeast so my mama could teach. But she just took me, and my brother and sister stayed with my father. And Mama we stayed with some folks who babysat me because I hadn't gone to school yet, started to school yet. So every morning, these people were strangers. I didn't know them, never seen them before. They were good to me. Nobody did anything. They took care of me. They were kind as they could be. But I didn't want to be there because I didn't know them. And Mama was leaving me with these strangers. And I'm 5, so you can imagine this. So Mama would hang her coat on the back of the door. And I would wake up. I'd tell myself at night, my plan was, I got to get up early so I can make sure Mama doesn't leave me here on another day. Because, I'm 5, and I'm thinking I can make all that work. Well, I always slept through her leaving. So I would wake up, and the first thing I would do is look at the door, and her coat would be gone. And so then I would just cry because I was left. And then I would think, I'll just stay in the bed. But then, you're 5, and you got to eat, and you got to get going. So after a while, I have to get up and go face these people who were always wonderful and took care of me. That little girl still worries that she'll get left. She won't, because I'm a good mother. But I have a picture of my little 5-year-old girl on my nightstand, and I talk to her a good bit, because she can be a tyrant if she's not looked after. So she lives that energy, that capacity to be a little bit antsy about, oh, who's going to leave me now? Has to be acknowledged, has to be dealt with. And if I don't deal with it, it then becomes a big piece of shadow that sits on my shoulder and whispers in my ear, and I don't get to hear what it's saying, but it's disruptive. So what is whispering in your ear that's disruptive, that didn't get the attention it was begging for at some point in your exploration of ourselves, has to be answered. And it may not be that. It may be whatever your family narrative is, whatever your historical narrative is, you need to pay attention. And pay attention to how it is currently informing those communities that live here. So do you ever really sit and try to figure out, why is it so hard for us to build bridges to people who are different? Why? I mean, I look out here, all of us are human beings. When I was working on my PhD, I studied Jung a lot, and I was getting ready to write my dissertation. I had to defend the prospectus, and somebody who was not too smart argued with me that how was I applying Jung to African Americans? And I said, well, I thought Jung was talking about human beings. I thought that's what the Jungian thought was about human beings. And I thought African Americans were human beings. Now, if that's not the case, could you help me get it straight? So, yes, we have different particularities, but we have a lot of universals. And we do have to make our peace with, this is my particular presentation in the world, but universally, we are so much alike. And you want to tell me that you think our particulars were so particular until Jungian thought doesn't apply to us. Could you help me with that? And after a while, they caught on to their racism. And then I was a little scared girl because I was trying to get my PhD out of them. They really wouldn't want to have that conversation now because I've learned a few things since then. The notion that somebody would think that a set of thoughts about the human psyche and human consciousness leaves out anybody is just, I can hardly take it in. All human beings on this planet are human. And everybody is loved by God equally. You know, I mean, that message has just got to be internalized. And I say to people who want to make the difference so great that you can't build a bridge across it, then you've got a bigger problem of trying to figure out what kind of God would make all these categories of human beings. It is, do you believe, what kind of God do you believe in? Do you believe a God that made a hierarchy of humans? Some are over here and they're this kind of thing, and some are here and they're this, you know, and some of them are loved and some of them aren't. It's a lot of stuff to make your peace with, but there's some first things that you have to make your peace with before you can go anywhere. And you have to decide who your God is. And do you want to be well more than you want to be right about your prejudices? Do I want to hold on to the wounding of oppression more than I want to be well? If I want to be well more, then I'm willing to build bridges even to the oppressor. Because in the final analysis, the oppressor is also a human being and loved by God. Now, I always like knowing that. I want God to dislike some of the folks I don't like. But I haven't gotten any message that that's going to happen. So my job is to be open to the healing that makes it possible to love even enemies. I mean, there's some stuff in the Bible that talks about loving your enemies. You're never going to love your enemies if you don't get to love the parts of yourself that you've sent, your inner Siberia. You got an inner Siberia where you've exiled these parts that you don't want the light to shine on. You won't love your enemy because the enemy is inside. And if you project somebody out there to be the enemy, then they have to stay enemy forever because you didn't get this inner enemy healed. And you don't have to believe any of this, but I want to tell you something. This psychological dynamic works in every human being. You don't have to name it, you don't have to believe it, you don't have to respect it, but it's there. And you know, if you think about the contrary thoughts and feelings that you deal with, you don't have to have a PhD to understand it. It's pretty simple and clear. You know, that's why that scripture, do unto others the way you want to be done unto, makes some sense if you're doing right by yourself. But if you're not, don't do unto me as you're doing unto yourself, because I don't want to be at the other end of your wound stick or wounding stick. I've got my own sticks, and they're ample, really, so I don't need any extra ones. So think about this. Are you following this? I'm trying to tell you about 35 or 40 years worth of work here in 35 or 40 minutes. So Jung is somewhere turning over in his grave because I'm making short shrift of this. But I don't think you have to study Jung for 40 years to get the point. The point is asking and answering, do we want to be well? And persevering, constantly staying with the question, staying in the interrogation, staying in the being willing to pay attention and to have the revelation of some new parts of ourselves. Not getting so wedded to the ego that we can't make a shift. You know, once I identify myself as, oh yeah, I'm smart and I'm good and blah, blah, blah. It's important to know I'm smart, yeah, but I can be dumb. I'm good, yeah, but I can not be good too. There's an opposite side. You know, I'm generous, yeah, but I can be stingy. So whatever good sides, whatever the light is, whatever the consciousness is, if we flip it over, like Gibran says about sorrow and joy, if you turn over your joy, you see sorrow. If you turn over the sorrow, you see joy. And there's really the duality here. It's real, it exists. And we're called to navigate all this stuff, to do the good works that have been carved out for us. So we don't need one more project, probably. If you look at the projects you're doing, you're probably doing plenty. You may need to shift them, change some of them. I don't know. There are a bunch of parishes here, and churches are notorious for this. and we just keep on doing stuff out there. And academia too. Whenever we find an issue that we need to really maybe face some inner stuff about, we just want to start another project. Because if we get people busy, at the end of it, you're tired. You think you've done everything that needs to be done. But actually, you skipped a few steps, like starting with the first thing first. The first thing is maybe to do nothing for a while, to sit with it, to see what happens, to see if you can hear what the real message is. So I want to say, I so lose track of time when I'm talking, so please tell me how I'm doing with time. If you want to have a little bit of a encapsulation here, I want to say, start close in. Start with the first thing first, not the second, not the third, the first thing. But in addition to that, stay committed to persevering. You know, when Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson talked that day at the Supreme Court about the old woman on Harvard Yard that walked up to her when she was a first-year student at Harvard, scared to death, coming from wherever in her small town life had brought her. And the old lady said to her, persevere. Persevere. What does that mean for you to persevere? For you as an individual, for you as a person in a parish, in a diocese, in a country, for you in the midst of a broken country, broken world, for you, for all of us on a planet that's getting tired of us because we just are like scavengers, you know, taking everything and walking on roads that need us to shift gears. What does it mean to start close in? I would like to suggest that perhaps you could reimagine the journey. Reimagine. You know, reimagine your understanding of Ephesians 2:10. What are the works? What are the works that need to be, the good works? And are the good works getting in the way of the real work? Is a question to be asked. Just because we're doing good doesn't mean we're doing right. Do you understand that quote? Do you understand that? It's good. It's very good, but it wasn't yours. So it's important for all of us to be sure we're doing what was ours to do, because then it has a kind of power that does pass understanding, a kind of peace that does pass understanding. I think you get to the peace that passes understanding when you're so clear about what you were to do until there's just, your head's just there. And it doesn't really matter what anybody says, what anybody does, how anybody characterizes it, you know. You know, when people asked Jung if he believed in God, he said, believe? That was a strange thing for them to say. He said, no, I know. I know, which is way beyond believing. So my last thing to say to you is, what do you know? What do you know for sure that brings you the peace that passes understanding? And are you willing to persevere to get there if you're not there? Interrogation. When I wrote this meditation book, the editor quibbled with me about interrogation. That's such a harsh word. So it may be harsh, but it's right. And if we publish this book, it stays. Because we have got to be that much engaged in asking the questions of ourselves. Help out your inner community, and the outer community will get better, and you'll feel better. God bless you as you keep on being courageous. Amen. Thank you. 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 Thank you all. Thank you. Thank you so much. You are so sweet.